While the rest of the world is, still arguing over where to put the next 5G tower, there's something so much quieter and honestly so much more massive happening right above our heads. Picture this. It's June 2026. Out in the remote, desolate expanse of the Gobi Desert, China does something that completely sends shockwaves through the entire aerospace industry. They roll out a brand new, completely unproven rocket, the Long March 12B. They load it up with highly valuable commercial payloads and boom, successfully launch it right into the twilight sky. That level of sheer engineering audacity, it isn't just about showing off, it's the starting gun for the literal death of the cellular dead zone. Today, in this documentary explainer, we're going to unpack the mystery behind the Guanfeng project, also known as Thousand Sails. Just look at this headline for a moment from South China Morning Post. This is the news behind today's video. Starlink rival Guanfeng hits satellite milestone. But is it too slow and costly? Constellation now has 201 satellites in orbit, but the company is said to be under pressure to ramp up launches. With that said, let's go straight to the intro.
The algorithm buries channels that show the truth like mine every single day. The only thing that fights back is you. One like, one subscribe, turn on the bell icon. That's how the truth about China survives on YouTube. Don't let it disappear. Thank you very much.
Just listen to this quote for a second. Imagine a world where the term dead zone simply doesn't exist. It is the unstoppable reality of China's celestial expansion. Read that and really let the immense scale of this sink in. We're talking about a secret, rapidly expanding global infrastructure being constructed hundreds of miles above us right now. Whether you're scaling the highest peak in the Himalayas or sailing across the deepest, darkest trenches of the Atlantic Ocean, this tech is designed to keep you as connected as if you were standing right in the middle of downtown Shanghai. The ultimate endgame of the G60 constellation relies on this staggering number right here: 15,000. 15,000 satellites. While traditional telecom companies are out there still trying to figure out how to lay fiber optic cables across really difficult terrain, China is effectively just bypassing the ground entirely. They are weaving a massive space net out of 15,000 individual nodes, permanently turning the sky itself into one giant high-speed base station. And look, this isn't just some distant futuristic blueprint. As of June 2026, they've already hit a monumental milestone, officially placing 201 broadband satellites into active orbit. This represents a series of high-density back-to-back launches that prove without a doubt that they've moved from the testing phase into aggressive real-world deployment. Moving on to Section 2, the orbital rivalry, Guanfeng versus Starlink. This brilliantly illustrates the strategic trade-offs of orbital physics. Look at that middle column. Starlink sits in a much lower orbit, around 550 kilometers up. That gives SpaceX a slight advantage in latency simply because the data doesn't have to travel as far. But Guanfeng is positioned higher, between 800 and 1160 kilometers. Why do that? Because that higher altitude gives each individual Chinese satellite a massive coverage footprint. They can establish a continental-scale service with far fewer active nodes, basically accepting a tiny latency penalty of just 10 to 20 milliseconds in exchange for incredibly vast reach. Section 4. The economics of orbit. Industrializing the stars. Now, getting thousands of supercomputers into orbit requires a lot more than just good physics. It takes an absolute economic machine. What's really fascinating here is the financial reality of this new space race. Through extreme standardization, Guanfeng has created a highly efficient flat panel satellite production line. However, as the numbers show, a Guanfeng unit currently costs around 1.5 million US, so it still remains slightly more expensive than SpaceX's highly optimized Starlink units, which sit anywhere from $250,000 to $1 million each. China is catching up fast for sure, but SpaceX's head start in reusable rockets still provides them a real economic edge. Even so, we absolutely cannot ignore the sheer trajectory of their domestic innovation. Traditional Chinese communication satellites used to cost a staggering 300 million yuan. Through relentless, aggressive cost reduction, they've systematically slashed that price by 96%. Today, those advanced flat panel units are being churned out for just 10 million yuan apiece. That 96% reduction is the exact mechanism that makes a 15,000 satellite constellation financially possible. Section 4. Direct-to-cell technology, the 100 gigabit optical space mesh. To really understand this, we've got to crack open the hardware. We're talking about science fiction level technology humming inside these boxes. Primarily, they're 100 gigabits per second optical inter-satellite links. Essentially, these satellites shoot lasers at each other to pass your data around the globe, entirely bypassing the need for ground stations. So what does this actually mean for you? Well, in the past, connecting to a satellite meant lugging around the bulky, super expensive satellite phone with an antenna the size of a ruler. Not anymore. Thanks to the 3GPP Release 17 global standard, this network uses standard 5G spectrum. That means the exact same unmodified off-the-shelf smartphone already sitting in your pocket can act as a satellite terminal. Let's walk through how this builds a truly unified network. Imagine you're driving out of the city. Step 1, you move out of range of your local cell tower. Step 2, without you having to do a single thing, your phone automatically searches for an overhead signal. And step 3, it seamlessly connects to a satellite node flying at 17,000 miles per hour, giving you instant broadband access. It acts as a literal sky extension layer that follows you right into the desert, into the polar forests, or way out onto the ocean. When we put the two side by side, the physical limitations of our current world become pretty obvious. Traditional terrestrial networks, ground towers, currently leave over 70% of the Earth's surface completely without coverage. 70%! It's just too expensive to build cell towers in the mountains or the middle of the ocean. The SpaceNet, driven by the SpaceCell DT-01 test satellite that just launched in June 2026, simply ignores geography. It offers unstoppable, borderless, ubiquitous global access. Section 5. Next steps and global expansion. Launching the future. So the hardware works and the satellites are being built, but how on earth do you physically launch thousands of rockets without bankrupting your economy? The answer to that launch bottleneck is the legendary Hainan Commercial Spaceport. This is the crown jewel of China's new space economy. They've constructed this massive 83-meter modular steel tower designed specifically for a brutal, high-intensity industrial rhythm. Get this, they actually eliminated traditional underground flame trenches altogether, replacing them with a two-directional deflection cone. Because they assemble rockets locally right at the spaceport, they've shrunk the pre-launch cycle down to an insane 7 days, testing reusable rockets like the Zhuqi 3 and the Long March 12B. This infrastructure is designed to eventually support an aggressive routine of weekly launches, and the moment of launch is truly a spectacle of engineering. When those rockets ignite, the pad's precision nozzles dump 500 tons of water in exactly 15 seconds. Think about that volume. This massive artificial waterfall instantly cuts the extreme heat and noise by 30%, protecting the launch pad from being destroyed so it can be used again just days later. Now, as for who is actually going to buy this service, this isn't just domestic infrastructure. Under the Belt and Road Initiative, Guanfeng is a massive digital export aiming to become the gold standard for global connectivity. Back in early 2026, Brazil's telecom regulator officially authorized SpaceOut for commercial operations, specifically targeting remote schools and hospitals that traditional Western providers simply couldn't reach. From South America to Southeast Asia, China is selling the ultimate plug-and-play internet solution. Of course, putting 15,000 new objects in space naturally raises some massive concerns about orbital debris, but the engineers actually accounted for this. The 1,000-satellite fleet is built as a highly regulated green machine. Each satellite has a designed operational lifespan of 7 years. When its time is finally up, an automatic deorbiting system activates. The satellite physically maneuvers itself back down into the Earth's atmosphere, where it burns up completely, leaving absolutely no long-term footprint or space junk behind in an already crowded orbit. Honestly, it is an incredible time to be watching this history unfold. We are literally witnessing the birth of a bipolar orbital market that is going to define exactly how humanity connects for the next century. If you found this documentary explainer fascinating and learned something new today, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive into the technology shaping our world. But before I go, I want to turn it over to you. Is direct-to-cell the future of your next smartphone? Would you pay an extra $10 a month for a connection that literally never drops, no matter where you are on Earth? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to read them. Thanks for joining me on this journey, and I'll see you in the next explainer. Goodbye.